Lieve luisteraars, we kruipen langzaamaan uit de coronacarantaine, maar de studio's van Radio Salto zijn helaas nog niet geopend. Daarom ook deze week een uitzending uit het rijke verleden van Radio Zwammerdam. En ik kan op dit moment natuurlijk niet heen om de wereldwijde protesten tegen racisme. Het coronavirus lijkt wat op de achtergrond te raken en nu worden we met onze neus op een ander, ingrijpend en wereldwijd probleem gedrukt, dat helaas al decennia, zo niet eeuwen, zeer hardnekkig blijkt. Daarom is mijn luistertip de uitzending van Radio Zwammerdam uit januari 2017 over racisme, segregatie en het onderscheid tussen witte en zwarte scholen in het dossier Amsterdam. Deze uitzending is in het Engels, maar mocht je daar geen zin in hebben, dan kan ik je ook zeker de reportage Hoe dekoloniseer je een museum aanraden. Want voordat we iets aan racisme kunnen doen, moeten we eerst begrijpen wat het is en hoe het zich uit in onze samenleving, bijvoorbeeld in onze scholen en musea. Geef gevolg aan de hashtag Educate Yourself.
Wetenschap op Amsterdam FM. Radio Zwammerdam.
Goedemorgen en welkom bij een nieuwe aflevering van Radio Zwammerdam, het wetenschapsprogramma van Amsterdam FM. Mijn naam is Mirjam van Zuidam en vanuit de Amsterdamse OBA presenteer ik vandaag weer een spiksplinternieuwe Zwammerdam-aflevering. In deze aflevering een veelbesproken en behoorlijk beladen onderwerp, namelijk segregatie en integratie in het onderwijs. Er zijn al behoorlijk wat discussies gevoerd over de rol van scholen in onze samenleving. En samen met onze twee gasten doen mijn mede-presentator Henk Ruigrok van der Werven en ik er vandaag nog een schepje bovenop. En niet voor niets, want het Nederlandse onderwijs kent nogal een unieke situatie. De verzuiling en de in dezelfde periode wettelijk bepaalde vrijheid van onderwijs, die bepaalt dat iedere ouder vrij is in de schoolkeuze van zijn kind, heeft gezorgd voor een breed scala aan onderwijsvormen. We hebben bijzondere en openbare scholen, Jenaplan en Montessori, de vrije school voor ieder wat wils. Maar deze vrijheid van onderwijs kent ook een keerzijde, namelijk segregatie. Sinds de jaren 70 is een onderscheid te zien tussen zogenoemde zwarte en witte scholen, waarvan het leerlingenbestand verschilt op basis van etniciteit en sociaal-economische status. Over dit onderscheid, de terminologie en de wenselijkheid ervan, spreek ik vandaag met mijn twee gasten, die ik in het Engels ga introduceren, omdat we het gesprek ook in het Engels gaan voeren. Vanwege mijn eerste gast, Julia Kozar Altin-Jelken, I practiced, is Assistant Professor Education and International Development at the University of Amsterdam. And she's quite good at Dutch, as I've noticed so far, but not good enough to participate in a scientific discussion. Is that right, Julia?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Nice you're here. Next to Julia is my second guest of today, Imane Oulali. She is PhD student at the Research Institute Child Development and Education, also at the University of Amsterdam. And like Julia, but with a different angle, she is studying the role of culture, ethnicity and religion in Dutch schools. Imane, welcome. Before we start, I would like to ask you, what kind of school did you attend as a kid?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I actually went to a Montessori school.
Okay.
When I was younger. And the majority was from another ethnicity than myself.
So it was a mixed school or?
I wouldn't say mixed. I think it was a pretty homogeneous school with, I think, a few ethnicities as an example.
And were you aware of that? What kind of school you were attending, or?
I don't think that I was aware of that at the time.
No?
No.
Okay. On the other side, next to me sits, as I said before, my co-host, Henk.
Good morning.
Good morning. Were you aware of the kind of primary school where you were walking around?
I was in a very wide middle class neighborhood, white Protestant school, like Christian school, and I was not aware of that at all. We had 2 colored people in our whole school, I think, and they were from the family Adakwa, and that I know their name still says something, I think.
Yeah.
And Ghanese father and white mother.
But only now, when you think back,
No, when I
you
think
realize.
back, it's like that's very weird that we are the only white people in the whole school.
Yeah. Okay. And also seated at this table is one of our regular columnists and expert on higher education. Can I say that, Bas Belleman?
Yes, you can.
Yes. Okay.
Bas, I'm a journalist.
You're a journalist,
and
higher
also education.
Yeah, exactly. And Bas, you're writing a column about this subject today. Was it hard to write a column?
Well,
this time?
To be fair, I am a journalist on higher education, but I'm also a poet. So I wrote my column about poetry, just to avoid your expertise. I thought if you were there, banging out all your expertise about higher education and ethnicity, then I come here with a column that's just not any good anymore. That would be very bad. So. Now I wrote it in Dutch as well because my English is not there.
That's all good. Let's have one Dutch little break in our episode today. That's great. So let's start. Let's start with Julia. You've shortly heard her already. At the University of Amsterdam, she's researching the implications of the terms black and white schools. In fact, she's not only researching this, but she's also pleading to get rid of these terms. Julia, I want to start by asking, what do these terms mean exactly, and how did we start to use them in the first place?
Okay, thank you very much also having me here. It seems that we started using these terms in 1970s. So there was an article in Het Parool talking about apartheid in Bijlmer area in Amsterdam, because they were referring to some schools that have only students from Suriname. So that's the first time they used the term zwarte scholen.
In the 70s in the Bijlmer.
Yeah, in the 70s, in the media it was used. But then also, as I spoke to some professors who knew those times, they also said that the first time within the scientific community, it was used by two researchers from Nijmegen University. But their aim was to get attention to segregation issues and to poverty issues. And later on, the students who were attending these schools increasingly became Moroccan and Turkish and some other minorities. But the labels remained the same, and they were increasingly used even by the ministry, by some semi-official government institutions as well, and scientists also use that. And in media, it's almost everyone is using these terms. So what do they mean? There is no official description of what it is, but it is used for schools. For instance, black school is used for schools where 50% or more of the students come from minority background. And in some sources, it's 60%. So that's how it is called.
Yeah.
And white school is used for schools where the majority is ethnic Dutch, or you can call them as native Dutch, but I wouldn't be calling them as white today.
Yes.
And we can discuss that later on, why I wouldn't call them white.
Let's first go back to the origin of the terms.
Yeah.
Because you're saying the term black was used for black children, Suriname children in the first place, but then more Moroccan and Turkish kids also appeared on these schools, and the terms remained the same.
Yeah.
In that time, was there this debate in the public area about these terms? Were people aware of the negative value of these terms?
Yeah. One of the interviews that I had, and this professor is one of the most well-known names on segregation in this country, and what I heard from him, that there was a discussion within the scientific community whether these terms are appropriate or not, and some people strongly felt that these terms are not appropriate. However, at that time, some professors of African descent wanted to keep the term black.
Oh, really?
Even though also migrant organizations of Moroccan and Turks, they said that clearly that we are not black, and we do not resonate with the black identity. But however, eventually the ones who didn't agree with it, they were not, maybe for some reasons, were not strong enough. So eventually the labels remained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why are you pleading to get rid of the terms? What is the reason for you that you think that terms are not appropriate anymore?
So It's not just me pleading. First of all, it's good to maybe highlight that. I work with 8 other researchers in my department, which includes also the head of my section of the department, that all these people, all these researchers strongly believe that there are a lot of things that are quite wrong with this type of labeling. And we work actually, for a year almost, we had several discussions and we wrote an article together which will be published in the coming weeks in one of the major newspapers, because we want to come out as a one single voice within the department and say what is wrong about this. So let me explain in advance what is wrong with the labels. Because these labels, in effect, actually lumps together everyone who comes from non-Western countries with a label of black, excluding Japanese and Indonesians. So this already assumes that they are one group. They are not one group. They do not share history. They do not share culture. They do not share a common heritage. But then you label them with black, which is a racial term, because a lot of people think that black and white, when you talk about schools, it's just a technical term, that it's neutral, or as if it's just code. It's not. These are not neutral terms. Black and white historically carries a lot of meanings with them. They are hierarchical terms. In a lot of cultures that I interviewed, and this included people with very different backgrounds from Morocco or Egypt, Syria, Iran, Turkey. I also spoke to some people from Africa, from Asia or Latin America. In almost every culture, black has a lot of negative meanings. And I asked them specifically what is the association of black. And what they told me is black is negative, it's associated with darkness, black is bad, inferior, backward, or black is wrong. And also, particularly in African culture, black is associated with evil. It's associated with black magic or witchcraft. So it's even more negative in African culture. So if it's so negative, and the white is linked with positiveness, with goodness, with innocence, with purity, superiority, beauty, I mean, these are all in the Dutch culture as well, right? So how come we think that it's okay to label children and schools with such a negative label, and it's okay to label some others with such positive connotations? Because our constitution talks about equality, right? Through citizenship education, we tell children that we are all equal, respect each other, we are saying. How can they respect if we differentiate them in two different labels that are very different?
I'm really interested. Is there a reason you can think of? Can you answer that question yourself, maybe? Why is it that, because when I hear you speak, I think, I recognized it, that the connotations of the word black are so different from the connotation of the word white. But still, the words white school and black schools are still used. So I'm wondering, can you try to answer your question why we think that the word black school should still be used?
When I talk to people, I don't meet really people who, once they start talking and reflecting about these terms, who thinks that, I have reflected on this consciously, I thought about it, and I still think that it's great to call these schools black. I didn't meet such a person. Okay. I think it's a problem of reflection. We do things sometimes very unconsciously. We socialize into using certain labels, and we stop thinking about that, and we don't realize what we are doing. So it's a matter of, and this radio program is great in that sense that it's an invitation for everyone to think about what we are doing and why we are doing that. It's the same with white. Why do Europeans some of them call themselves white when their skin is not white? It's a peach color, it's pink color. And why the colonizers didn't choose the race as pink race, but why did they choose for white race? Do people ask this question?
Probably not when talking about black schools or white schools.
But in general, when we talk about racial issues, it's a matter of reflection.
Yeah. So how are you researching this exactly? What's the shape of your research? This is an English episode. We're sort of improvising.
Methodology, or the sample.
Thank you. Yes,
exactly. What I'm doing is that I'm talking to people from very different backgrounds, from very historically very different backgrounds, I mentioned different countries just that I talked to. And the sample is mainly highly educated people. I talk to researchers or PhDs who do studies on diversity, on ethnicity or segregation. But I also interview students at our university with ethnic minority or ethnic Dutch, because I want to understand what they think also. So our bachelor students or master students. And I also talk to professors, and also some of the people that I talk to are outside of our university. I also like to talk to human rights experts. So these are also the people, because I want to also understand legal dimension of this issue, because there is a legal dimension also, because there is a question, is this cultural racism or not?
Yeah.
So these are the sort of people that I talk to.
So the labels might actually be illegal to be used.
I spoke to a professor from University of Utrecht, because she is an expert on international conventions. And she told me that these labels are in violation of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, because Netherlands signed this also in the early 1970s. And according to this convention, you cannot label specific groups just because of their cultural background with a racial connotation. And that is racism, cultural racism. Because now I or my children are with these labels, are labeled as black. And if I would tell you that I come from Spain, would you still label me as black? So it clearly says that it's not about how I look, who I am. It's about where I come from.
Yes.
It's about culture. Because when I landed in Barcelona, people speak to me in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm black, all of Spain is also black. All of Italy is also black.
So the problem is that outside appearances label you in a different group maybe than your ethnic background.
It's not only even my appearance, because I'm saying that in Italy or in Spain, they speak to me in local language.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So it's about, but so that because it's more about that I come from Turkey, so culturally I'm seen as different. So then that seems to legitimize labeling me with this blackness, but this doesn't mean that labeling people because of their biological appearance is justified either. I don't find it justified either.
Can I ask one question? Without disagreeing about the connotations of blackness, there's also the positive side with black culture, black music. It's not just negative connotations with the word black. How do you fit that in the theory about black being bad? Isn't that simplifying the connotations? Isn't that also destroying a bit of the good of black?
Yeah. So black, when it was developed centuries ago, it wasn't developed by Africans themselves, and a lot of Africans still resist this label. It was developed by colonizers and slave traders. They were the ones who came up with these labels, and there is a reason why they chose for white and black, because these colors have significant meanings in Judaism and in Christianity.
I understand
so
that.
now I come to your point, is that in the 1960s and 70s, some groups of African descent in the US, they reappropriated the meaning of black, and then they said, we change the meaning and we make it something empowering and beautiful and strong.
Yeah.
However, for that to happen, the group themselves need to acknowledge themselves as black and find it empowering. The problem in the context of Netherlands is that they did not ask the Moroccans or the Turks, other minorities, whether you feel Dutch or not, or whether you feel black or not. And I asked that, and they don't feel black at all.
So the
So
history
it's an
of that
opposition.
empowerment doesn't really apply here.
It doesn't apply to everyone. Even in the U.S., where the black is beautiful or this kind of movements are, it is contested there also. A lot of people find black still derogatory in the U.S. as well. Some polls says that more African Americans find black derogatory, and then they prefer African American instead of black. So it's very contested. So some people find it empowering, but for that to happen, the group themselves need to come up with that identification. You can't impose that from outside. That's the difference. And I spoke to a lot of African descent people also about this. And I said, how do you feel about me being labeled as black in this country? And one PhD researcher from, for instance, Zimbabwe, she told me that it's outrageous. because you can't be black. If they are telling you that you are black, it only means that you are inferior, because you are very different from me, and you can't decide, oh, do I feel black? Can I be black or not? Then they said, no, you can't be. So they are more offended than other groups, actually. Yeah.
And I want to go back to your research, kind of, because you talked to people from the universities as well.
Yeah.
But the label black school and white school is for like primary schools and high schools. Are you also going to the primary schools and high schools to look how it works out for the children to be called a black school?
Yeah. One of the researchers who was part of the group that I mentioned, she interviewed 4 teachers in order to find out what teachers felt about this. Only four teachers. And I actually had recently I participated in a public discussion with a lot of also teachers and school directors as well. They were also there. So a lot of people question these labels, but I didn't particularly personally interview children myself. And I think it will be great if the research can be expanded to those contexts as well.
Think, like, the both of us, like Imane,
Yeah, Imane.
We have, in the beginning of this show, we told that we were not really aware of the school we were in.
Yeah.
And isn't it that like the black school label, does it affect the children who are in a black school? I kind of wonder, because maybe like the bigger problem could be like the more socio-economic problems and not the label, which is also, I think, important to research, but isn't like the socio-economic problems more urgent right now before
I would like to respond to that, because the example that I just gave was from my childhood, and those were other times than now. I mean, if you look at the contemporary the society as it is now here in the Netherlands, is that children are actually, because I visited a lot of schools in the Netherlands also for my research, is that they are now aware of this label, and especially if you're going to so-called homogenous schools with a majority of a lot of mixed or different ethnicities, they are aware of this, partly or mainly by the media, social media, so they know that, oh, I'm now at a school that obviously is not okay, is not good. So that's not good. I mean, I don't think it's helping their self-esteem at all. So I think that's a big difference between my example that I gave of my childhood than nowadays. I think it's really different now.
Is it then like the ethnicity, like the color, or is it more the socio-economic background that, like in the media, from the media, I think that's very different between the schools. Like the black schools supposed to be like socio-economic less high than the white schools. Isn't that more of a problem than the color label? Kind of more.
I think the color label.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think exactly for the reasons that Julia just stated, if I ask a Moroccan child, a Moroccan Dutch child here in Amsterdam, in a so-called homogenous schools with other same ethnicities, the child would say, I don't understand why they call us like that. I'm not black. So I don't understand why are we called like this. I mean, it's a good school. I have my friends. We're doing just fine. But it's not good that they are called like that, because first of all, they're confused, and also by the negative connotation of being called a black school. It's not doing any good for their self-esteem.
If I may, can I add to
yes,
that
of course,
question?
yeah. Go ahead.
There is an overlap among the minority groups with this low socioeconomic background. So, and when we talk about as if these so-called black schools are schools where the educational outcomes and so on are low compared to others, we are forgetting schools in the northern part of this country, for instance, where they would be, because of the ethnic composition, called white, but they are not doing well. There are lots of ethnic Dutch students who do not perform well, who come from low socioeconomic background, and within this whole debate, we are excluding them. They need also attention.
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought.
No. Exactly.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look at the statistics, you would see that minorities in terms of education improved their performance. But these groups of ethnic Dutch coming from low socioeconomic background, they didn't improve. So we need to differentiate these things. So the reason in these schools there is low achievement, it's not because certain ethnic groups have low IQ or something. It's about class. It's about socioeconomic background.
So, to sum up this discussion, it seems like both of you are in favor of getting rid of the terms black and white schools.
Yes, absolutely.
Very much so.
Because of the negative connotation, also
Yes.
because of the confusion. But I've heard you use the terms homogeneous schools, majority schools.
Or maybe just segregated
So
and
what do we
non-segregated
propose?
schools.
Are we going to use different terms that are more clear and or are we just not going to use these terms at all? Are we stopping the labeling completely? What do you think?
Should I start first, or do you want
No,
to
you
start
can start
first?
first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, I think these schools shouldn't exist. I think we
Okay.
need to tackle segregation, and I think we will come back to that.
Yes.
Until we tackle segregation, I would say we don't need to label them. If we are talking about specific issues, we need to specify whatever it is that we are talking about. And if we are discussing segregation, then we can talk about schools with high segregation or schools with low segregation, or I'm completely fine with what Iman is saying, homogeneous schools or heterogeneous schools, or mixed schools, or multicultural schools, diverse schools. There are lots of alternatives that are there, and we don't have to pick one.
Yes.
But
Exactly.
let's just drop this racist connotation.
Let's drop
I
them.
totally agree with Julia.
At least for the rest of the episodes of this show, we're going to try to not use them to make a good example.
And I want
Yeah, Henk,
to
go
ask
ahead.
a question to Julia. I think it's very, you're a scientific researcher, but you talk like an activist, kind of. And I think it's very interesting. It could be. But how do you see yourself as an activist as well?
That's a question that I keep getting. So I speak with passion. Also, if you see me in the class speaking, you will see that I'm a very passionate speaker. And that does not make me, I think, an activist. And it depends on your definition of activism, because if you define activism as the person who wants to bring positive change in the society, I'm an activist. You are also an activist because you are making this radio program. But if you define activist as a person who marches on the street, who organizes boycotts or campaigns. I don't do any of that. What I'm doing is part of my job. I have to speak to the public through different media about the findings of it. I cannot collect data and then sit on it. That's not what I'm supposed to do.
That's true,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
did you have the idea, before you started your research, were you like really open, like, okay, also the outcome of my research could be black schools is a very good label for we should keep the label black schools and white schools because it's good. Like, how did you get into the research? Did you like?
How did I get?
That's kind of like the side. What I learned in university, that scientific way of thinking, like that you have a question and that it could be all answers.
Yeah, that, of course, absolutely. Now I'm studying actually mosques, their influence on integration, and I don't know if they are contributing to integration or not. I don't know the answer. But when I started studying black and white school labels, it was a different story because from a philosophical, moral, or legal framework, I could sense that there was a problem. And I wanted to understand how other people felt about it. And I also spoke to lawyers. And it seems there is a real problem. And I didn't meet anyone who says that these labels are not toxic. I heard this literally. I was told that they are toxic. We need to stop. And somehow people didn't dare to speak up about this before. And that's because I expected that there will be more variety in the discussion, that some people might defend the labels. No, people are not defending. And when I published the Het Parool interview, for instance, I received a lot of comments from people saying that we are very happy that you had the courage to speak up about this, that people are just afraid to talk about anything that is linked to race. There is a fear in the society to talk about that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put the terminology aside for now and address another connected problem, the problem that this kind of segregation exists in the first place in schools. Why is it so hard for schools to be a reflection of the multicultural society? And is the call for mixed schools the right call? We'll be talking about these issues in the next half hour. But first, over to Bas Belleman, who has his own view on the matter and has a poetic approach, as he just told. Bas, go for it.
Ja, dat doe ik weer in het Nederlands.
Ja, dat mag.
Dan voel ik me toch wat meer op mijn gemak. Ik moest bij Zwart en Witte, sowieso bij de discussie die leeft, denken aan gedichten van Lucebert. Er is een gedicht dat heet Er is een grote Norse neger in mij neergedaald. En het woord neger is natuurlijk het is een omstreden woord. Het is een koloniaal woord. Het komt, dat is ook geen fijn label. En toch is het een groot dichter die dat gebruikte in 1959. Dus ik begon me af te vragen, hoe lees je dat gedicht nu? Wat doe je er dan mee? Dus laat ik eerst even dat gedicht voorlezen. Er is een grote Norse neger in mij neergedaald, die van binnen dingen doet die niemand ziet. Ook ik niet, want donker is het daar en zwart. Maar ik weet zeker, hij bestudeert er aard en structuur van heel mijn blanke almacht. Hij morrelt eerst aan half vermolmde kasten, dan voel ik splinters schieten door mijn schouder. Nu leest hij oude formulieren, dit is het lastigst. Te veel slaven trok ik af van de belasting. Dat is toch een wonderlijk geval, dat gedicht. Die grote Norse neger die daalt neer zoals de Heilige Geest uit de hemel, die daalt neer. Of als een wraakengel misschien, maar hij heeft geen zwaard. Hij doet heel stil dingen in het donker die niemand ziet en alleen maar kan vermoeden. Het zit natuurlijk vol met allemaal connotaties die we wel kennen. Het primitieve, het duistere, je weet niet wat er gebeurt. En tegelijkertijd gebeurt het allemaal in die blanke man zelf. Want daar is hij in neergedaald. Die grote Norse neger die morrelt aan half vermolmde kasten. Misschien zijn dat ideeën die nog overeind staan, maar eigenlijk al niet meer houdbaar zijn. Er schieten wat splinters in het rond, maar het wordt nog erger. Hij gaat ook oude formulieren lezen, kennis vergaren, de geschiedenis kennen. En dat is het lastigst. Want de blanken zijn rijk van de slavenhandel en daar hebben ze nooit voor betaald. Die trokken ze af van de belasting. Er is een schuld ontstaan. Zelfs het gedicht lijkt niet af, het stopt zomaar. Het woord neger komt dus ook voort uit die schuld, uit de koloniale tijden. Het verwijst naar zwarte als handelsware. En zo zou die blanke spreker van het gedicht het inderdaad gebruiken. Lucebert wist wel dat het geen neutraal woord is. Waarom zou hij ook een neutraal woord laten neerdalen? Dat is ook niet interessant als dichter. En de blanke in het gedicht klinkt wel bang, maar volgens mij is de dichter dat niet. Het is een stereotype, die grote Norse neger, waarmee de blanke normaal gesproken afstand houdt. Want dat is het stereotype, dat doet het. Maar het gedicht gaat er juist over dat het niet meer lukt. Dat het in hem komt. Lucebert, vertel ik maar voor de compleetheid erbij, was de keizer van de 50ers. Een groep dichters die frank en vrij schreven, vlak na de Tweede Wereldoorlog. Die hadden op dat moment zeker niet het gevoel dat de westerse cultuur superieur was. Die kwam namelijk net uit een verschrikkelijke oorlog. Zij keken juist graag naar Afrikaanse kunst en probeerden te kijken waar ze nog meer naartoe konden. Hij hield ook van zwarte muziek, schreef over Thelonious Monk en over jazzmuzikanten. De burgerrechtenbeweging was aan het opkomen. Ja, er is nog geen biografie van Lucebert, maar het lijkt me dat hij dat schitterend vond. En toch gebruikt hij die gekke raciale term. Die grote Norse neger. En hij bestudeert die blanke almacht, kennis is macht, hè, van binnenuit. En het lijkt dan wel alsof de revolutie in het gedicht van buiten komt en van binnen tegelijk. De blanke man in dit gedicht bedenkt hoe een zwarte man naar zijn binnenste kijkt. Hij ziet bijna zijn eigen geschiedenis en zijn eigen erfschuld door diens ogen. Het is wankel, maar het is een begin. Daarom hoop ik toch uiteindelijk dat dit gedicht de tijd doorstaat en dat die grote Norse neger van Lucebert eerder als een kiem van het antiracisme dan als een bij nader inzien racistisch gedicht zal worden gelezen. Dat hoop ik. Misschien zit ik ernaast, maar het lijkt er toch op dat hij in 1959 dat perspectief begon om te gooien in plaats van het proberen te versterken.
Dankjewel, Bas. Prachtige gedachte dat we in elkaars hoofd dingen aan het wankelen kunnen brengen. Julia, would you like to respond to the column of Bas? Or
Or do you want
maybe
to start
Imane?
first? First? I feel like I spoke a lot.
Yeah.
We'll go
So
over
what
to
I
Imane
noticed,
now.
Bas, is that that in this beautiful poem, that in your explanation, that you also notice that there are a lot of connotations about black, and actually those are again negative connotations about this black Negro that is coming into the mind or head of this white man. So that's something that I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time also, when you were mentioning like music, jazz music, talking about black music, so it is, I mean, when I listen to it, it's like, you see, it's really in our mind and how we explain things. It's we internalize it and how we can talk to other people about it. So it's really something hard to tackle, but we're willing to tackle it.
Because it's also the speaker, the one that says I in this poem, is someone else than the poet, I think. Because the poet is, I feel that the poet is less negative about blackness than the one that says I in the poem.
Yeah, what I understood, maybe he was, I mean, I think that, so the poet maybe was actually, how do you say it?
Probably more sensitive.
Exactly, in trying to describe, in describing it. But how maybe other people would interpret it as, this black guy, so it means maybe anger and, other things in my head. So something is going to happen in my mind now. And
when I was coming here, then it struck me all of a sudden that there was another poet from that same movement, the Vijftigers, Remco Kampert, who also wrote about a Negro. I forgot when I wrote this.
Yeah.
It's quite a famous poem as well, called Een Neger uit Mozambique, in which almost the same happens. There's a Negro man that comes here to study the water in the Netherlands, if I remember correctly. And they're all quite excited because there's this man from Mozambique and he's coming here and he'll fit well with the colored pillows, and which is also quite stereotypical about stereotypes in roughly the same time. And I find that quite fascinating that they were already trying to get a grip on that race issue when it didn't even it wasn't even that prominent yet in the Netherlands in the 1950s. I find that interesting.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I saw this poem, and there's no biography of Liesberg yet, but I went to the museum in West Bergen, Kranenburg, and there was an exposition about Liesberg, and I saw this poem as well, and I had to think about it. Like, I had to read it a couple of times to kind of find out what he meant, but I thought he kind of saw like the very stereotypical Dutch guy that was not aware of some racial awareness or something, didn't really thought about it yet, and that he's like the first ideas of what would be wrong with like the stereotypes came in, like this,
Sensing the change of the times.
yes.
That's what I kind of found in the poem when I read it there. You feel the same kind of?
That's probably what happens, because if it neerdaalt, when it sinks in, that's the start, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's continue with talking about the research of Imane, because the next half hour, well, I think we have 20 more minutes. We'll be talking with PhD student Imane Oulali, who researches the influence of religion and culture on well-being, school motivation, and pro-social behavior. But Imane, before we talk about the research you're doing, at different kinds of Dutch religious schools, I also want to talk to you about an article in which you have participated. The article is called Doet onderwijs segregatie ertoe and is written by Michael Mary and Orhan Agirdag. And you, Imane,
I'm sorry, I have to correct
or?
you. It was Michael, Mary, Geerdriese and I.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was confused then.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me. Because my question was, you participated and translated the article, is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. And the article questions the prevailing view that mixed schools are what we want, because they improve integration in the multicultural society. And it's a prevailing view indeed that I would like to illustrate with a following fragment of news here. I'm looking at our technician right now. In the fragment we will hear a father explain why it is that he wants his kids to go to a mixed school. Let's listen to it.
Over wat is nou eigenlijk een goede school?
Jonk is werkzaam bij de onderwijsinspectie als hoofdinspecteur basisonderwijs. Hij vindt gesegregeerde scholen onwenselijk.
Nou ja, we wonen in een gemengde stad. En ik vind het heel gek om in een gemengde stad te wonen. En helemaal apart naar school te gaan. Ja, dat vind ik gewoon raar. En ik gun iedereen zo breed mogelijke ervaringen. En ik geloof dat onderwijs er ook een taak in heeft. Ik geloof niet dat je een samenleving kan hebben waarin je goed met elkaar leeft als je ook niet met elkaar naar school gaat. Dat geloof ik uiteindelijk niet in.
We gaan eerst beginnen met de namen. We gaan even goedemorgen zeggen tegen iedereen. Goedemorgen.
Okay, so we hear the father say, I want my child to go to a school that is reflecting the neighborhood that he lives in or the city that he lives in. Do you agree with this father, Imane?
I agree with his view that he says that I would like to have my child in a school that reflects my neighborhood. And ideally, I think that every parent would like to have his child in a school with several ethnicities that represent here the Netherlands. But realistically, we have to see what your neighborhood has to offer. And for religious minority children, that means that they are actually stuck with going to schools that are not mixed in a certain neighborhood.
Because that would be a reflection of their neighborhood, you're saying?
Yes. So if I'm talking about ethnic minority children in certain neighborhoods, for instance, in Amsterdam, maybe those parents don't bring their children to another neighborhood for a more mixed school, but they put their child in a school that is near to them.
Yeah.
And that can mean that the child will go to a more homogeneous school with a majority of mixed ethnicities.
Because the common thought this father is explaining is that by mixing majority and minority children, they will learn from each other. They will use each other's social and economic capital to learn from each other. But in the article that I was addressing before, in which you participated, the viewpoint is posed that mixed schools might not be the best alternative for minority children. Instead, we should see the alternative of voluntary segregation. Can you explain what is meant by this term, voluntary segregation?
Yes, because I think that it was written in the view that in the society that we are living now, I mean, like Julia explained, is that now for decades we are already segregated if we're talking about school segregation. But let me take you... maybe centuries ago, we just came out of pillarization, maybe 50 years ago. It's something that we inherited here in the Netherlands. And maybe that's why we have the highest segregation rates here, I think, in the world, if we're talking about school segregation.
Because we chose to, in the past, to be segregated.
Yes, in the past you saw that there are different pillars living next to each other, but only in their own pillars. I mean, there were like book clubs, sports, everything was organized, even media. They were organized for the same pillar. So I'm not saying that is still happening, but we did inherit some of the segregation that was caused in those days. And
so what do you mean by this term voluntary segregation? What kind of alternative is this?
With that term, I mean that is that for children that cannot benefit from being part of the majority, and that in this case, then the majority means the ethnic Dutch ethnicity, then we have to be more realistically and looking at what does the neighborhood have to offer. And actually in the case that in my study that I did is looking more at religious minority children. For them, being part of a religious school in a religious community really helps them to get a higher self-esteem and higher religious self-esteem, what eventually helps them to promote a higher school well-being, better school motivation, and that's a solution that's already at hand. So it's already there. And
so saying that segregation is maybe inevitable.
Well, it's already happening, Miriam. We're already living in a segregated society.
So you're proposing to maybe use the segregation to our advantage by improving the minority schools, like religious schools, or?
Well, in this case, more for the religious minority children, that they then can benefit more from being part of a majority, just like ethnic Dutch ethnicities do in the Netherlands. I mean, they already benefit from homogeneous schools. And for religious schools, which are often also pretty homogeneous, they can also benefit from having, for instance, the same religion as a in the curriculum, or I'm not sure how to say this in English, but
because you're doing research now in Dutch religious schools, where you actually measure what kind of influence their religious education has on their well-being.
Yes, and also on their pro-social behavior, because obviously what happens after primary school, children go to secondary school, and realistically, those schools are more mixed than primary schools. They're more heterogeneous than the homogeneous religious schools here in the Netherlands. So children have to be prepared for society, and citizen competences should be taken in by all schools in the Netherlands. I mean, that's by law, but I think that religious schools can play a bigger role in that, or should pay more attention to that before they send off their children to secondary school, where obviously maybe they have more choice of choosing a school than their parents did for them during primary school. I mean, they were too young. I mean, a 4-year-old child cannot say, I want to go to a nice school in a neighborhood, or I want to go to an Islamic school or to a Reformed Protestant school. That's not a choice they make.
It's the parents that do that. Yeah. I can see Julia really wants to respond to these viewpoints.
Yeah.
What do you want to say?
I think this is where our opinions differ, which is nice, right?
Of course.
So first, I 100% agree with the father who spoke. And Iman mentioned that we have segregation because of residential segregation, but it's only partly true. There is a difference between residential and school segregation of 25%. That means that residential segregation only explains part of the story, that even in the same neighborhood, there are schools where only ethnic Dutch go, and there are schools, maybe they share the same garden, and there is another school where only ethnic minority go. Yeah, so that's number one. Number two, the concept of voluntary segregation, assuming that the segregation that we see is voluntary, that people choose that. I don't agree with that. There are studies asking parents to what kind of school do you want to send your child. Sjoerd Karsten from my university, who was my promoter also for my PhD, asked parents this years ago. There's another study from sociology department. They asked parents in Amsterdam, what kind of school do you want your child to send? They all in majority said that we want mixed schools. We want diversity, multiculturality within the school. And none of these parents wanted their children to go to a school where the minorities are in majority. Even minority parents didn't want their children to go to such schools. So then separation is not voluntary. I don't think so. And segregation is not inevitable. It is happening here. It doesn't mean that it's happening because it is inevitable. It is happening because there is no decision or no political policy
yes.
from the level of municipality and from the state. Do we have a state policy on desegregation? We don't have it. There is lack of political will at in The Hague. They say that segregation is not a problem, and I fully disagree with that. And since they don't act on it, that's why we have segregation.
Okay, and segregation might also be because of the freedom of parental choice. Is that the correct
parental
English
choice
term for it? De vrijheid van onderwijs. So parents can choose where their children go to school. Imane, can you respond on what Julia said? Is on her response to the voluntary segregation? And
at the last point that she made is that there is indeed not such a policy in The Hague for desegregation. And I think because you had the finger at the right spot, because I think that they feel that, well, segregation is not a problem in their eyes. So, and just to go back to the father that we heard in the
Nieuwsuur
in Nieuwsuur, I mean, calling segregation inhumane. Let me just say that I visited over 40 schools in the Netherlands the last few years, and I did not see any inhumane schools. I saw happy children in their own environment, just like mixed schools that I also visited, and just like homogeneous ethnic Dutch schools. As long as there is no better alternative for these religious minority children, this is essential. This is the way where they can prosper. This is the way where they feel at home. That's the way where they feel together. They belong together. And that is something they have in common. And especially nowadays, how we talk about certain groups in society, children are aware. I mean, if we're talking about 5th and 6th graders, children between 10 and 12 years old, I mean, they get this from the news that they're not talking very well about their group. So parents make these choices for them to put them maybe in a religious school, hopefully for their child to benefit from being part of the majority.
Okay, and so how are you measuring in what way the religious schools influence these children? How do you measure if this is really a positive influence on their well-being, as you're saying?
Well, first of all, we looked at how indeed we could measure this by like what kind of mechanisms can influence or improve their school well-being, their school motivation, and their citizen competences. We had to develop our own instrument. That's the Religious Collective Self-Esteem Scale. And that scale can measure how a child feels about belonging to a certain religious group. I mean, his or her own religious group. And then you can get an amount of, religious self-esteem. That's how it's called. And, well, we believe that when you have a higher sense of religious self-esteem, that a child can benefit in religious schools from school well-being, but also from how to deal with, for instance, differences in society, how they can perform at school, so school motivation. And that's essential for when you go to secondary school and the rest of your life, actually. So all the tools that you can have, so to have equal chance later on.
So if I can sum this up, you're proposing a different solution to segregation. So instead of focusing only on mixed schools and making sure we have more mixed schools, there's also the alternative of re-evaluating the more homogeneous minority schools like religious schools.
Yes, and even when you can see, like for instance, RTL News did, I think they do it now for 2 years in a row. They measure CITO scores of every school here in the Netherlands. And what you can see is they clustered like all the schools with each other. You see that the Hindu schools and the Islamic schools and the Reformed Protestant schools, they are doing excellent. They're doing very well. So I did not measure, by the way, I must say that, not measure the CITO scores. I'm just saying that RTL did it. I only focus on the social, the social sides of these children. So how we can enhance their self-esteem, or how their self-esteem is developed, how religious self-esteem comes into play, and how this may affect their school well-being and their school motivation, and eventually their citizen competences.
Okay. And thinking about this, because the article that we talked about before, doet onderwijssegregatie ertoe, also states we should improve existing black schools, let's not use the term minority schools, by hiring a more diverse set of teachers. So the article is saying that by hiring more diverse set of teachers, then the teachers might understand the perceptions of the minority child better. So not the composition of the children in a black school is the problem, but the composition of the teachers. And Orhan Aghidag, who also wrote another article about it, calls the current set of teachers at black schools 50 Shades of White, which gives children the wrong impression. So my question is, at these religious schools, how important is it that the teachers are also a diverse set to make sure that the children get to know different kinds of religions, different kind of cultural backgrounds? How important are the teachers in the story?
I think that the teachers are also very important. The schools that I visited in the Netherlands were surprisingly, I mean, of course, when you visit a school, you have like an idea in your mind of how it's going to be like. So for the, let's say for the Hindu schools, I thought, oh, maybe there are going to work more Hindu teachers and so that it would be more coherent with each other. But I was surprised that that's not the case, because I think that the problem or it's not a problem, by the way, in my view, but I think that what they're facing is that you cannot put all teachers from the same religion in the schools simply because they're not there. So I saw I saw situations that just worked. So the teachers were not always like from the same ethnicity or from the same religion. But I must say, I think it was the case for the Reformed Protestant schools. I think that was, an exception in this case. But I did not see that, for instance, at the Hindu schools or the Islamic schools. I saw Dutch teachers, Surinamese teachers,
so
Turkish teachers.
The,
I mean, it
the
was
diverse set
yes.
of teachers is already in place. Then.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Ja, ik hoor alweer de eindtune lopen, dus dat betekent helaas dat we moeten gaan afronden. Dit was de tweede aflevering van dit jaar, waarin we de Nederlandse traditie van witte en zwarte scholen onderzochten. Heel hartelijk dank ik mijn gasten, Julia en Imane, vanwege hun verfrissende inzichten. Gelukkig zijn jullie het eens geworden, ook over de termen. En wil ik onze vaste columnist Bas Belleman bedanken voor een intrigerende column. En natuurlijk mijn charmante collega Henk Ruijhoog van der Werven. En de technicus van deze week, Elmer Rikhoff, bedankt. Volgende week weer een nieuwe uitzending, namelijk onze terugkerende Zwammerdam Stemt uitzending, waarin Luc en Misha de onderbuik van de verkiezingen onder de loep nemen. En tenslotte wil ik graag alle luisteraars bedanken. We hebben jullie redelijk uitgedaagd vandaag door in het Engels te discussiëren. Mocht u niet zijn afgehaakt en nieuwsgierig zijn geworden naar onze andere dossiers en afleveringen, abonneer u dan op onze podcasts. Subscriben kan via de iTunes Store, Soundcloud of waar dan ook je podcast luistert. En dan hoef je nooit meer een uitzending te missen. Maar het leukste blijft natuurlijk als je live langskomt in de studio op zondagochtend. Mijn naam was Mirjam van Zuidam. Dit was Radio Zwammerdam. En ik wens u nog een hele fijne zondag.